Hey everybody, my name is Jay Martin, and you got me in a good mood. So little giggly right now. But hey, this is a 1v1 game on grassy flats. First thing, oh, it's raining. Hey everybody, if you ever want to make sure there's no rain when you're hosting, if you select weather to be light rain and time of day to be afternoon, there will never be rain. I can't explain why it works, but it fucking works. So, if you ever want there to be no rain, that's what you do. This is a game that was sent to me. I'm not playing this game. Excuse me. Allow me to clear my throat there. I'm not playing in this game. This game was sent to me by a friend of mine. His name is Ruse, and he's one of the few guys in Huntsman that's actually sort of near my time zone. So we wind up playing together a lot. And Ruse sent me this game. He said, "Hey, I do a couple interesting things in it." The first thing that Ruse does, and man, I don't know if you can tell that, maybe looking there, but he's playing as France, and his volts, see how super wide they are? That's kind of a weird thing that you can do when you select light infantry. It's hard to replicate. I wish I could maybe show you a demo game, but if you have your light infantry in regular behavior, and then you stretch them out all the way, and then you click the light infantry behavior button, they stretch out extra far, or they stretch out farther than you can normally stretch them out in light infantry behavior. The trick with that, though, is if you try to move them again by dragging them, they will not maintain that extra wide formation. So you kind of have to like move them in a group or keep them in the same formation. I'm not really explaining that really well, but what Ruse wanted to do, he was telling me about this. He's playing against Prussia, and Prussia really good lights, so he wanted to keep his lights, his volts, really, really spread out like this. The advantage of this is this means that they're going to take less casualties over time. Now, most people don't bother with this spread out formation here because you can't move them like that. But what Ruse did is at the beginning of the game, he set his guys up like that and then moved them in a group, I'm guessing. I'm not exactly sure. But the advantage of that is it keeps them really spread out. And what that means is that 5 Prussian Fusiliers or 5 Prussian light infantry are going to shoot at his volts for quite some time, dealing quite few casualties. And that's just kind of a thing. So if you're the Prussian player, you want to be aware of that and maybe move some more firepower in. Now, over on the left side, this is the other interesting thing Ruse does. Actually, I want to pause and talk about the Prussian player's build because I thought it was kind of interesting. And I should have done this a minute ago. The Prussian player has 5 light infantry, has some line, and then there's some line, so 1, 2, 3, 4, what is that, 6 regular line, and then has 2 elite units, 2 foot guards. He puts his general in the foot guard unit. Now, I have no problem with putting your general in an infantry unit. A lot of people do this. However, I kind of there's room for debate here, so if you have an opinion on this, by all means comment, but I don't like putting your general in an elite unit, like a foot guard or an old guard or whatever. The reason is that you want to, there's cross purposes. A, you want to keep your general alive, right? But the second thing is that I want to be able to use my elite units. Like, I want to be able to use my foot guard. And if I put my general in an infantry unit like this, I'll probably hold it as a reserve, like a last, last resource. But if I have a foot guard, I want them engaged. And so I kind of disagree with putting the general in an elite infantry unit. If you're going to put your general in an infantry unit, put it in a regular musketeer or regular fusilier line or whatever, and hold him in reserve until you really need him at the end. But if it's me, I'd want to use my foot guard, and if I'm using my foot guard, that puts my general at a greater risk of being shot. So I'm sure there's some debate on this issue, but that's kind of my logic on it. I'm all about, I totally, I'm down with putting the general in the foot guard, general in infantry unit, but don't do it in an elite unit that you want to actually use. The second thing is that the Prussian guy has 6 cav, and he's put chevrons on a lot of them. Now, Prussian cav is not as good as French cav, right? That's the reality. But I think that if you're going to use your cav, as I talk a lot about in my videos, the way you want to use your cav is to support your infantry. You want to use your cav to support your infantry, but more than that, you want to use your cav. Well, what am I trying to say? bottom line, you want to use your cav to support your infantry, and I think that the Prussian player here is going to. This might be an inexperienced thing, but he's going to pick a fight here that he can't win. So there's 5 Prussian Lancers, and these guys are already red because they're in the neighborhood of this old guard here. Okay, so this, let's slow down to slow-mo here. This Lancer is gunning to engage the chasseur. Now these are shooter caps, so they get a bunch of shots over there, and this guy is making a huge blunder because he's charging his cav blank. They're charging into an area where there's an infantry unit that can fire on them, which also happens to be an old guard. That unit routes at 23, which is pretty early because of the old guard fear ability. This guy, I think, is doing a smart thing in that he's charging Lancers at stationary cav. If I was Ruse right here, you got to get your cav moving, because they will take a charge bonus. The Prussians will have a charge bonus here. Ruse kind of mentioned this to me, and I disagree with him about how the game mechanics work. But the flaw that the Prussian player is making is he's got his cav going against French cav, mismatch, with an old guard, super mismatch, and that old guard is an infantry unit that's going to put fire on this cav. Now, these chasseurs also have the advantage of they're getting the inspire ability for the old guard, so this is pretty much just like a fucking mini-side right here of Prussian cav getting fucked up. Now, Ruse does a really smart thing, and he charges his cav back into the rear. You can see these units are about to get the morale penalty for being attacked in the rear. Yeah, there you go. Concerned attack in the rear. But this is just a fucking genocide. And I gotta say, I can understand where the Prussian player was coming from. 5 cav against 3. You think you're going to have an advantage there, but you forget a couple things. A, those are shooter cavs, they're going to deal a bunch of casualties. B, there's an old guard in the neighborhood. And C, the French chasseurs are honestly a little stronger than the Prussian Lancers, especially once you get into dedicated melee. So this turned out to be a huge disaster for the Prussian player. Ruse doesn't lose a single fucking unit in this aspect of the engagement. But that turned out to be a huge disaster for the Prussian player. 5 cav units dead. Just because Ruse held his ground. And so, good play to Ruse right there, but if you're the Prussian guy, you probably fucked up the instance that you were using your cav on isolated, little sortie without, use your cav to support your infantry, okay? Now, if I zoom out to the big picture here, Ruse has kind of got this guy enveloped. Ruse has the 3 cav still trotting on this area. The old guard is mowing down. That musketeer routes at about 70. Old guard are good, man. Old guard are so fucking good. Now, notice here, let me slow down to pause again, because something interesting happens. Now, you remember Ruse had his lights here. Now, this guy is routed the center one. If you watched my previous video, me against Amon, what the big fundamental flaw that I had against Amon right there is I didn't push where I was strong. I didn't push where I had a huge advantage. Now, I think that this guy moving his lights up like this was kind of a micro mistake. Like, he had his guys set to just target that volt, and so they just followed the volt when it started to route. But in the center, this guy should have a huge advantage because he has, 3 or 4 of his lights right here that he should be able to kind of get range advantage on the Prussian player, but he doesn't do that. This turns into kind of a disaster because this guy's lights are way out of position. But you notice, again to pause, what's going on big picture is Ruse is getting around this guy's flanks, but this guy should be stronger in the center of the line. It would really help if he had cav left, but what I think he should be doing is pushing harder down the center. That might be a bit harsh of a criticism because this guy has fucking problems everywhere. I mean, I guess it's his right is folding really fast. But I think maybe if I rewound this game and the whole part where I was camera focused over here and I showed you what was going on in the middle, I think maybe if this dude would have focused harder in the center, it would have turned out better for him. That's an idea. But what's going to happen right now is just Ruse can take his time in the center, and again, I don't know why this guy is advancing his musketeer up like that. Like, this unit's just... This is either A, some kind of micro mistake, or B... I don't know what this is, but like that unit was randomly walking up, and it's going to get shot to fuck for no real reason. Um, Over on the left, Ruse has got his cav working, and that looks like a unit that probably came back from routing. Yeah, let's say a unit that was just scared by the old guard. But, if we zoom over here, Ruse is kind of getting his envelopment on, and when he was describing the game to me, he was like, well, it's like I did that cav movement on the left, and then it got really boring because I just enveloped him. And that's kind of what happens. He can take his time. There goes the last Prussian cav, and if you want to watch what kind of a beatdown this is, Ruse still has 2 shooter cav back here that he's not even bothering to use. And over here, there's an old guard and a brave, and they're just kind of ripping apart this dude's flank. So, I mean, the game is over at this point. But, I think maybe the lessons that we take from this is that if you're going to use your cav on independent sorties like that, you kind of got to be aware of unit strengths and weaknesses, like the French cav. If you're playing, I play as Prussia a lot, so I got a ton of love for the Prussian player, but you really got to be aware of what the strengths and weaknesses of your army are. You can't send Prussian lancers into a flank with just some shooter cav and an old guard hanging out. You can't do that. You got to use your cav to support your infantry. You got to be a little stronger than that, and you really got to give some respect to the old guard. I mean, if you're the Prussian player, job number 1 for you is you either A, got to be using your lights really fucking effective, because that is the only advantage you have when you play against France. And trust me, I play as Prussia against France a lot. You really got to use your lights to the maximum advantage. That is the only thing you have going for you. That was kind of a weird rhyme. That's the only thing you have going for you, and you got to be really careful about that. You got to be really careful about the French cav. I mean, I think that in a 1v1, France has a huge advantage over Prussia. Now, if you're in a 3v3 where there's less room to maneuver, it's a different story. But in a 1v1, France is a lot stronger than Prussia. And so if you're going to be Prussia against France, you got to be really careful how you use it. And likewise, if you're the French player, you have an advantage. So you should press those advantages where you have them. And if you're the French player, be aggressive. If you're the Prussian player, you got to be really careful, man, and you got to pick your spots. You got to pick your spots really well. So this game right here, from this point, turns into kind of a rout. It's the poor Prussian dude. I mean, once all his cav is gone, his offensive opportunities were really limited, and I think there was a couple little micro misclicks that this player probably didn't intend. And I think this is a pretty decent play that Ruse played here, but you put all those factors together, and there just isn't a whole lot of hope for the Prussian players. So this was kind of an interesting game. Take note of how Ruse deployed his lights earlier in the game. That's a certainly effective strategy. And then, think about, if you're Prussia, how you want to use your cav, and how you want to do your whole thing right there. So, GG to both players, and thank you for watching. You can check out more information and download more vids. I think this replay is actually up online at twreplays.com. That's where I got it from. I asked Ruse to put it up there for me, and he did. And so there you go. So Huntsman Ruse on the French team, and the Prussian team was from the EOS clan, which I'm not familiar with. But there you go. There's the name. It's Artyom Antonov CAD is the name. So, good game, dude. I thought you played fairly well. And just to drive the point home, look at that. I mean, these 2 units, that's Ruse's right flank, and he just ran these 2 infantry units right up into his face. So it was kind of an interesting 1v1 game. Again, thanks for watching. Check out twreplays.com.